What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com. Thanks for clicking on my face and checking out this review. I can tell that everybody is super excited to be here today. And this is Moving On. AKA, it's Grace and Frankie. But that's basically why you're watching this. This is on Hulu. It does not have audio description, which is disappointing. It's an indie film. It didn't really go anywhere. It didn't really have a major wide release. I was kind of wondering where this would end up. I thought about renting it, but the VOD version of this doesn't even have audio description. So I was like, well, if I'm going to watch it without audio description, I'm just going to wait for it to hit a streaming service. Because I was interested in this film. It stars Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, as well as Malcolm McDowell as the object of their ire. And it's directed by Paul Weitz, who you may know from the many things that he has written, directed, and or produced. For example, he's the director of American Pie. He's the director of one of my favorite films, About a Boy. So he's a pretty solid writer-director. As you know, most of the films I looked at that I saw on his resume, I was like, wow, okay, well, at least all of these films I would say, if this was like a tomato meter, I think everything that I'd seen of his, I would go fresh on. So, that's a pretty good statistic. So would I go fresh on Moving On? I don't know. Let's talk about it. So Moving On feels very independent, feels low budget, feels like Paul didn't get the money that he really wanted to be able to make this happen. But he did get the cast. So this one, lies heavily on Jane and Lily, who are two former friends who both find themselves in the same place, sort of reunited after all these years, when the third wheel in their little friendship ends up passing away. And they go to her funeral, and her husband, played by Malcolm McDowell, is there, and Jane Fonda has made up her mind to kill him because, as you will discover as the film moves on, he did a very, very bad thing many years ago. And one of the things that I really love about this film is that this film does not think you're stupid. This film actually, one of the strongest things that Paul Weitz does with this film is he does not use a heavy amount of exposition. He doesn't have a lot of lines of dialogue where you feel like that line of dialogue was just put there to explain something to you or to explain something to the audience. Everything in here feels like it's a real conversation that could have actually happened. There isn't just like a data dump of information where it's like, remember years ago when this happened? A lot of people might just allude to something and then never finish that thought. They may just say like, yeah, that was back in the day after, and like, I don't know, but they know, you know what I'm saying? Like, because in that conversation, those people would know. And that's kind of what I liked about this film, was actually the script more than anything else. I really didn't mind that. I'm so used to screenwriters nowadays being so lazy with having like characters that just walk around dropping exposition to weird places. Like, I saw Netflix's Love Again last week, and this dude's boss has to drop this awkward thing about how his employee was left a week before the marriage into some conversation when he's trying to fire him from a podcast and tell him to go interview Celine Dion. He's like, you can't do the podcast. I took a risk on you after your wife left you a week before your wedding. As a fellow Brit, I took a risk. I need you to review Celine Dion. It's like, thanks for that completely odd exposition dump of information. Wrong character to deliver that. Just totally the wrong character for that exposition. But that writer in that moment was like, you know what? This feels good. I feel good about this. But that's the one thing about about Paul Weitz is he's had some really strong screenplays before. Notably About a Boy is a very strong screenplay, and yes, it's based on Nick Hornby's novel, so he had a great jumping off point. Here, I don't think this is based, I don't know if this is based on anything, but it's a little bit more original, so he just gets to let it flow. I don't think this is the most interesting thing that Paul Weitz has ever done. It's certainly not the most interesting thing that Jane or Lily have done. So this is definitely more on the lower end, plus it doesn't have audio description, which... This is a very dialogue-heavy movie. These people like to talk to each other. It's very modern. Oftentimes, somewhere in the dialogue, they'll let you know where they are, because they spend a lot of times at funerals, or they go to somebody's house or somebody else's place, and then they acknowledge that it's somebody else's place. So they do find some ways of, acknowledging, so that way you know where you are. You just don't know what the room looks like. For example, Lily Tomlin lives in like an assisted living facility. So when Jane Fonda goes over, she's like, when you said that you live somewhere, I thought you still had a house, and instead you live in this assisted living facility or whatever. I didn't think you meant an assisted living, however she said it, but it felt like something that somebody would actually say. I thought what happened to your house? You know what I'm saying? Like, where did your house go? You used to have a house. It felt a little bit more natural, like that could be something possibly in a conversation. There are a lot of really interesting sort of themes that run through this story. There's a little boy that shows up and visits Lily Tomlin's character that is very suggested to be, at the very least, exploratory of what he wants out of life. He's really interested in jewelry, and he talks about how he and Lily had done fashion shows before where he wears heels. I don't like to criticize child actors, but Red Bull, that kid. And he, even though it's not relevant to the necessary, larger storyline, it really helps to sort of flesh out Lily Tomlin's character, who's a lesbian in this, and obviously more sympathetic to what she sees in certain people, and and she sees what might be in this kid, and we end up dealing sort of with a subplot of, his family not being as accepted of this kid's desire to express himself. So that's kind of thrown in there as well as the fact that Jane Fonda has an ex-husband that kind of shows up out of nowhere, and she has to kind of face that and face, why she divorced him. And it has a lot to do with what Malcolm McDowell did. And he's still in love with her, and he's now been a widow for 4 years, and she's been divorced for even longer than that from her second husband. So the whole thing is all about timing and being in the right place, and just these character interactions. I liked it a little bit. I just didn't love it. I think this is an interesting piece. I liked a lot of the choices that Paul made with the film, but I don't know that it all necessarily worked 100%. It does have a very satisfying ending to it. I will say that. It's a very satisfying ending. He does wrap this up in probably the best way possible, and that was nice. And it's nice to see, because both of these characters have a very different vibe than what Grace and Frankie have. So even though this is Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, they do not act at all like Grace and Frankie. Jane Fonda isn't walking around the whole time drinking wine. And Lily Tomlin's character is much more grounded and much more realistic, and is not, running around burning sage and putting things in the freezer that don't belong in the freezer. So it's very, it's much more grounded. I'd love to talk about necessarily, this film not being watchable because of the lack of audio description, except I don't think I missed anything. And that's usually the key for me with deciding whether or not a film is unwatchable is, did I ever feel lost? I didn't. Did I ever feel like I was missing out on a really like important part of I didn't. The funny thing was that everything was either told so well by Paul through dialogue, or was just so obvious what it was that they were doing, that I didn't really feel like I couldn't follow this film. So I don't want to just be that angry blind guy that every single film I run into without audio description, I immediately say, this is unwatchable, this is unwatchable, everything is unwatchable. I hate my life, I do every once in a while run into a film that I think, yes, it would be nice if this had audio description, and I could say, because then I would know what rooms look like, and what a house looked like, and what people look like, and better descriptions of the people, and better descriptions of the places in which they live, and the interactions between them, and all sorts of things like that. But as far as understanding the main plot, being able to follow these characters, being able to understand their motivations, a lot of the things that we look for that sort of are the most important things. And this is kind of a genre that allows itself to be kind of a little bit easier to follow. It's very dialogue heavy. So it's a dialogue driven script, and Paul Weitz does a really decent job with this script. So it didn't rewrite the it's not going to win any awards. It didn't move me to tears. It didn't do any of that. But I generally once again enjoyed another Paul Weitz film. I guess this dude's a really underrated director. So I'm actually going to give Moving On a B-. So same grade I gave 80 for Brady. By the way. Anyway, that's it. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I do have a website, MacTheMovieGuy.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads at MacTheMovieGuy. You can go to the Audio Description Project, adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what is audio description, where you can watch it. And you can go to the ADNA.org. That's the ADNA.org. It'll let you know who's narrating your favorite films and television series. That's it for me today. I will review something else and see you guys on the other side.